It is often said that life has a way of revealing truths we are too blind to see in our youth. For Emily, an ambitious and striking young woman of 18, that truth was still hidden, wrapped in illusions of beauty, wealth, and status. She believed she knew what life owed her. She believed she deserved more than she had. But life, patient and unyielding, was preparing to teach her lessons she would never forget. Emily came from a modest, middle-class family. Her parents worked tirelessly, stretching every dollar, sacrificing their own comfort so she could have the best opportunities. With their effort, Emily earned a place at the most prestigious university in the city, a world of bright marble halls, tailored suits, and students who drove luxury cars to class. She was beautiful, undeniably so, with a charm that turned heads, and beauty, she thought, was her ticket into that glittering world. But her beauty alone was not enough to erase the invisible line separating her from her wealthy peers. She wore stylish clothes, but they were often bought on sale, sometimes a season behind the latest trends. She attended the same restaurants and cafes as her friends, but only because her parents quietly skipped meals or worked overtime to make it possible. Her friends were daughters of millionaires, heirs of family empires. They lived lives of abundance, shopping trips abroad, birthday parties at exclusive clubs, vacations on private beaches. Emily, desperate to belong, studied their every move, trying to imitate their mannerisms, their tastes, their way of speaking. And in her heart, she told herself that one day she would be one of them, not through sacrifice but through conquest. At the center of this dream stood Mike. Mike was the heir to a powerful food conglomerate, admired by everyone on campus. He was handsome, confident, always surrounded by admirers. Professors spoke to him with respect, classmates with envy, and young women with longing. For Emily, Mike was more than just a crush. He was the symbol of the life she wanted. If she could win him, she believed, she would finally belong to the world she idolized. But while Emily's eyes were fixed on Mike, another young man quietly admired her from afar. His name was Marcus. He was different from the rest of the students. He didn't arrive in a luxury car but by bus or sometimes on foot. His clothes were neat but plain, lacking the brand names that others flaunted. He came from a humble background, his presence at the university secured only by a scholarship and his relentless dedication to studies. Marcus noticed Emily long before she noticed him. He admired not just her beauty, but her determination, the spark in her eyes when she spoke passionately about her ambitions. He dreamed, perhaps naively, that one day she might look past the glittering world she chased and see him for who he was. He tried her in small ways to approach her, a friendly smile in the library, an offer to share notes after class, a casual good morning when they crossed paths. But Emily, eager to impress her wealthy friends, brushed him aside. At first, her dismissals were subtle, a polite nod without a word. But as the months passed, her indifference sharpened into disdain. One afternoon, in the campus courtyard, Marcus gathered his courage to invite her for coffee. Emily's friends stood nearby, watching with raised brows and suppressed laughter. She looked at Marcus, then at her friends, and made a choice she would later regret. "Coffee? With you?" she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Marcus, you're sweet, but let's be real, you're not exactly my type. I don't want people thinking I'm dating someone who takes the bus to class." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Her friends burst into laughter, and Marcus forced a smile, pretending it didn't hurt. But inside, he felt the sting of rejection, the sharp reminder of the invisible wall that separated him from her world. From that day on, Emily never missed a chance to reinforce that wall. Whenever Marcus appeared, she rolled her eyes or made sarcastic comments. When her friends teased her about his obvious interest, she responded with mockery. She wanted to make sure no one ever confused her with someone who would settle for less. For Marcus, it was painful, but he didn't lash out. Instead, he swallowed his pride and kept moving forward. He reminded himself of his goals, of the promise he had made to his mother when he earned his scholarship, that he would work hard, prove himself, and one day build a life far greater than the one people expected of him. Meanwhile, Emily clung tighter to her illusions. She continued to chase Mike, though he barely noticed her. She continued to pressure her parents into sacrifices they could scarcely afford, and she continued to convince herself that wealth, beauty, and power were the only measures of success. What she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that life was already setting the stage for a future where those illusions would shatter, and where the very boy she mocked would rise in ways she never thought possible. 15 years can change everything. Time, after all, is the greatest sculptor, shaping dreams, carving out destinies, and erasing the illusions of youth. For Emily, time stripped away the glittering mask she once wore. For Marcus, time fulfilled the vow he had silently carried in his heart. At first, Emily believed her life was still on the right path. After graduation, she expected doors to open simply because she had the degree, the beauty, and the ambition, but reality proved harsher. Mike, the man she once dreamed of winning, married someone else, a woman from his own social circle. Her friends, once constant companions, began drifting away, drawn into their own privileged lives of travel, business, and inherited wealth. Emily, who had built her entire identity around belonging to them, felt abandoned. Her own relationships were rocky. She chased men who dazzled her with power and status, hoping one of them would secure the lifestyle she craved. But those relationships ended in disappointment, some with betrayal, others with indifference. None of them gave her stability, none of them gave her love. Each failure chipped away at her pride, but she held tightly to the illusion that the next one would be different. Meanwhile, her family's finances began to crumble. The sacrifices her parents had made for years caught up with them. Loans piled up. Creditors called. Debts grew heavier with each passing month. The house where Emily had once hosted her friends with pride was now a source of constant anxiety. Her parents aged under the weight of stress, and Emily, despite her degree, struggled to find a job that matched her expectations. She wanted prestige, a high salary, a corner office, but those positions went to others. And while she turned down jobs she considered beneath her, the bills kept coming. In time, the unthinkable happened. The family fell behind on mortgage payments, and the bank threatened foreclosure. The turquoise dreams of her youth, the clothes, the parties, the luxury, were replaced by the bitter taste of survival. Emily, who once mocked others for being less, now faced the reality of living modestly. The mirror she once adored became a painful reminder that beauty alone could not pay debts or buy respect. Yet pride is a stubborn mask. Emily told herself that this was only temporary, that one day she would rise again. She clung to that belief as though it could shield her from despair. While Emily's world collapsed, Marcus's journey was unfolding in an entirely different direction. After graduation, Marcus didn't waste time searching for shortcuts or easy opportunities. He took the job he could find, as an electrician's apprentice. His work was simple, demanding, and often exhausting. But he embraced it with determination, learning everything he could. Wires, circuits, blueprints, each detail became part of his growing expertise. His hands, once dismissed as unworthy, became instruments of skill. His dedication caught the attention of clients, who valued not only his talent, but also his honesty and humility. They recommended him to others. And soon, Marcus was no longer just an apprentice. He was leading small projects, then managing a team, and eventually starting his own business. At first, his company was modest, fixing wiring, repairing systems, installing lights in small homes. But Marcus had vision. He reinvested every penny he earned, expanding little by little. Soon he was taking on larger projects, schools, office buildings, apartment complexes. His reputation spread not just as a skilled builder, but as a man of integrity. People trusted him, admired him, and wanted to work with him. Years later, Marcus's company transformed into a development firm known for constructing modern residential towers and commercial landmarks across the city. Hundreds of employees depended on him. His name became synonymous with quality and trust. He was no longer the boy who walked to class in plain clothes. He was a leader, a builder of dreams, not just his own, but of countless families who lived and worked in the spaces his company created. And through it all, Marcus never forgot the sting of Emily's words. But he did not let bitterness consume him. Instead, he carried that memory like fuel, a quiet reminder that dignity and perseverance could build more than arrogance ever could. By his mid-30s, Marcus had wealth far beyond what Emily had once chased, but he wore it differently. To him, money was not a symbol of worth. It was a tool to create, to provide, to give opportunities. He still lived with humility, treating everyone, from his top managers to the janitors in his buildings, with the same respect. Life had turned the tables, though Emily did not yet know it. The bank's lobby felt colder than Emily expected. Light poured through the glass facade, reflecting off polished stone floors and metal railings, but none of it reached her bones. She stood with her father at the counter, clutching a folder thick with notices, payment schedules, and letters that all said the same thing in different words. Time was running out. The clerk was courteous but mechanical. Policies, deadlines, numbers that did not bend. Emily tried to be composed, to sound confident and persuasive, but the conversation slipped through her fingers like water. Every attempt met a wall, regulations, interest, penalties. Her father's voice trembled as he asked if there was any way to renegotiate, any way to keep the house. The answer, delivered with professional sympathy, was no. They turned to leave. That was when Emily saw him. A figure entered through a side door. Sharp suit, clean lines, the quiet authority of someone who belonged in every room he walked into. Staff looked up at once. A whisper of recognition ran across the lobby. Emily, mid-step, froze. Her breath caught. The man turned his head slightly, scanning the space. For a moment, it felt like time folded, bringing two distant worlds into the same heartbeat. "Marcus," she whispered. He saw her, and his expression changed. Surprised, then warm, then steady. He began walking toward her. The staff around him paused, as if instinctively creating space. "Emily," he said, stopping a few feet away. His voice carried calm. "It's been a long time." She was suddenly aware of everything at once, the worn corners of her folder, the scuff on her shoes, the tightness in her chest. The past flashed, library steps, courtyard laughter. Every moment she had turned away from him. She managed a thin smile. "You look different," she said, then immediately wished she'd chosen better words. He nodded politely, then glanced at her father, offering a respectful greeting. "Good afternoon, sir." Her father returned it with a nod and quiet gratitude. Emily swallowed. "Do you work here?" she asked, already knowing the answer but buying time for her thoughts to steady. "I do," Marcus replied. "I'm the vice president." The words settled like thunder softened by distance. Not a boast, not a performance, just a fact placed gently in the air. Emily's face flushed, and with it came a collision of emotions: shock, disbelief, embarrassment, and something else she hadn't felt in years: humility. She glanced at her father, then back to Marcus. "We were trying to renegotiate our mortgage," she said, her voice careful, controlled. "We're in a difficult moment. We were told there's nothing that can be done." Marcus listened without interrupting. He didn't rush to fill the silence or reach for the role of savior. He simply stood there, present, letting her finish. "Would you be willing to hear us out?" Emily asked softly. "Just to see if there's any path we haven't considered." There were eyes on them: staff, customers, security. Marcus seemed to notice and shifted the scene with a small gesture. "Of course," he said. "Let's step somewhere more private." He turned slightly and guided them toward a corridor that branched off the lobby, his pace unhurried, his posture open. He held the door to a quiet meeting room and waited for them to enter first. Small details, but they carried a weight Emily could feel now, even if she wouldn't have noticed them years ago. The room was simple: a round table, a window with city views, a carafe of water. Emily and her father sat. Marcus took the chair across from them. He folded his hands on the table, attentive. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to be transparent. I can listen. I can make sure your situation is properly reviewed, and I can see if there's a program or restructuring that applies. But no one here, myself included, can bypass the process. Whatever we do must be fair and within policy. Emily nodded quickly. We understand. Her father opened the folder and slid forward a neat stack of documents, income statements, payment history, the letter that announced the impending foreclosure. Marcus scanned the pages, his eyes tracing the story that numbers told. He asked precise questions, the kind that showed he wasn't looking to impress, but to understand. How long had the payments been behind? What changed financially? What steps had already been attempted? Each answer layered clarity over a messy reality. There was a moment when Emily caught Marcus's expression, focused, compassionate, utterly professional. He was not here as a boy seeking validation. He was a man carrying responsibility. She remembered the look he had worn on campus the day she turned him down. Open, hopeful, the boy she dismissed had grown into someone grounded and strong. I'll refer this to our restructuring team, Marcus said. There are two potential paths, one that adjusts your interest and timeline, and another that involves a short-term hardship program. Neither is guaranteed, but both are worth pursuing. If you're willing to submit the full package today, I'll ask them to prioritize a review. You'll still receive formal notices. That's part of the process, but we'll be moving, not waiting. Emily felt something press against her throat, relief, surprise, and a kind of gratitude that felt bigger than words. Thank you, she said. It came out small, but sincere. Marcus nodded. Let's not thank anyone yet. Let's do it right and see where it leads. He rose, collected the documents, and stepped out briefly to alert his assistant. Through the glass, Emily could see staff moving with a new urgency. Calls placed, emails sent, a checklist starting to form. Her father leaned back, eyes closed, the first deep breath he'd taken all day. When Marcus returned, he set a printed list in front of them. These are the supporting documents the team will need. Some you've already provided. The rest can be scanned at the desk outside. If you'd like, I can have someone help you compile it now. Emily reached for the list. Her hand trembled. Marcus, she said, and then paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm sorry for the way I treated you back then. For a moment, the room held the quiet that always follows truth. Marcus regarded her, not with triumph or bitterness, but with a gentleness that made the apology land even deeper. Thank you, he said simply. We were young. We think we know what matters. Life has a way of teaching us. She nodded, the admission loosening something inside her chest. It does, she whispered. He didn't linger in the past. There was work to do. He outlined realistic timelines, next steps, and what to expect. He explained, clearly and without condescension, how the case would be evaluated. He was careful not to promise an outcome, but he promised effort and fairness. Somehow, that felt more valuable than any miracle fix. When the logistics were done, they stood. Emily's father reached for Marcus's hand and held it with both of his. Whatever happens, he said, voice thick, thank you for treating us like people. Marcus shook his head. That's the easy part. It's the only way this makes sense. They walked back through the corridor into the lobby, now buzzing with the late morning rush. An assistant appeared to guide Emily and her father to a scanning station. Marcus paused by the front desk to sign a form. For a second, Emily looked at him as the room continued in motion around them. Customers talking, printers humming, doors opening, the city itself breathing just beyond the glass. He turned back to her. I'll keep an eye on your file, he said. You'll hear from the team within a few business days. If there's anything unclear, reply to their email and copy my office. Emily nodded. We will. And Emily, he added, almost as an afterthought, but with a quiet resonance, whatever the outcome here, I hope you know this. Your worth is not defined by this house or these numbers. I've seen people rebuild more than finances. Sometimes the most important part is what we learn when we have less. She held his gaze. Years of pursuit, of wealth, of circles, of the illusion of being enough in other people's eyes, ran through her mind like a film. "I think I'm beginning to understand," she said. He offered a small, sincere smile. "That's a good place to start." Marcus stepped away, absorbed by the rhythm of his day. Emily watched him greet a security guard by name, thank a receptionist, exchange a word with a teller. Respect wasn't something he switched on for important meetings. It lived in him, steady and unforced. It wasn't showmanship. It was character. As Emily and her father finished scanning the documents, the clerk who had turned them away earlier came to the counter with a different tone, warmer, attentive. "We'll forward this right now," she said. "You'll receive confirmation shortly." Outside, the city air felt different, not because the crisis was over, but because something inside Emily had shifted. The fear was still there, but it no longer swallowed everything. She walked beside her father in silence, listening to the ordinary sounds of traffic and footsteps, the rustle of leaves, the lift and drop of everyday life. For the first time in a long time, the ordinary felt like a gift, not a failure. They reached the curb. Her father squeezed her hand, the kind of gesture that says more than words. She squeezed back. Only then did she realize what had been most shocking about seeing Marcus again. It wasn't the suit, the title, the staff who deferred to him. It was the ease with which he carried himself, the steadiness that came from building a life not on the approval of others, but on the unglamorous pillars of effort, kindness, and respect. That night, Emily would open her laptop and begin gathering anything else the bank might request. She would make lists, answer emails, and do the quiet work of facing what she had avoided. But standing there on the sidewalk, under a sky that was neither bright nor storming, she felt something like a beginning, not a rescue, not a fairy tale, just the first step toward a different kind of life. The following week was filled with waiting. Emily checked her email obsessively, each notification sparking both hope and fear. She caught herself rehearsing conversations in her mind, what she might say if the bank denied the restructuring, how she would comfort her father, what she could possibly do next. But then, on a grey Thursday morning, the message arrived. The subject line read, "Restructuring Proposal, Immediate Review." With trembling hands, she opened it. The document explained that the bank had approved a restructuring plan under Marcus's recommendation. The new terms reduced the interest rate, extended the timeline, and gave her family the chance to keep their home, provided they remained consistent with payments. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't forgiveness of debt, but it was hope. Real, tangible hope. Emily showed the letter to her father, and tears filled his eyes. "We have a chance," he whispered. "We can keep our home." That afternoon, Emily returned to the bank to finalize signatures. She saw Marcus briefly in the corridor, speaking with a team member. When he noticed her, he excused himself and approached. "Everything is in place?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. Her voice carried both relief and something deeper, respect. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for choosing to face this. It's not easy, but you did it. That matters more than you realize." She hesitated, then said softly, "I used to think money defined a person's worth. That's why I ignored you back then. But today, I see things differently." Marcus studied her expression. There was no arrogance now, no mask of superiority, only honesty. He nodded slowly. "Life has a way of teaching us what truly lasts. Wealth can disappear. Status can vanish. But respect, effort, and kindness, that's the kind of wealth no one can take away." Emily felt the truth of his words settle inside her like a seed. For years, she had chased illusions, believing that being seen with the right people, wearing the right clothes, or dating the right man would give her value. But here stood Marcus, the man she once dismissed, who had built a life not on appearances, but on character. As she walked out of the bank with the signed papers in her hand, the city around her seemed different, not because her problems were solved, but because her perspective was shifting. The noise of traffic, the sight of people rushing by, the ordinary details she once overlooked, all of it carried a quiet dignity. That night, Emily sat alone at her desk, reflecting. She thought of Marcus, of the boy she once mocked. now the man who had treated her with more respect than she had ever given him. She realized that the lesson wasn't about revenge or fate balancing the scales. It was about transformation. His, yes, but also hers. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow, "From now on, I will measure people by who they are, not what they own." It was not a promise of perfection, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are exactly what we need.